Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. I want to talk to you guys about growing in pots, containers versus raised beds versus growing in the ground. So of course there's, different situations that would require you, or at least you would benefit from growing in any of these options. And there's definitely pros and cons in both, in all the options. So I kind of just want to talk about them based on experience with you guys. The first thing I'd like to ask is, well, are you like a homeowner? Are you renting? How long are you planning on staying in this place? Because normally if you're going to, if you're renting a place or you're in an apartment, sometimes you don't even have the option, like say if you're like a balcony gardener, or if you're in an apartment, and you don't have that much space, then there is no options. Obviously you're going to be growing them in pots, containers, even maybe if you can purchase or build your own raised bed in the small area that you have, and which is totally okay, because if you want to grow something, which I highly encourage you to, then you got to make it work for the space that you have, right? So I highly encourage to do the best you can with what you have and whatever you can afford. In my place, I am in a small, narrow space, and so it's actually worked out best for me to have a container garden, basically. I do have raised beds on one side. Oh, by the way, this is not the garden that I'm talking about. But I'll show you some examples in this garden about raised beds and such in a bit. But for now, I want to talk about tiny gardens and narrow garden, like a patio garden, where there's like a very narrow, like an alleyway. So in that sense, I like to grow things in a container. So as the sun is moving throughout the year or throughout the season, you can pick up, the container and move it to wherever there is more sun or less sun, depending on what you're growing. That's the bit of like the challenge of growing in a narrow space, because you tend to get a lot of shade. And if you want to grow summer crops and melons and fruits, things like that, they're going to require more sun. And so actually growing in containers will give you that sort of flexibility to move things around as needed. So that's what I really love about containers. But containers, do dry out faster than in say a raised bed or growing it in the ground. So you have to water them more often. They also would deplete, the soil would deplete of nutrients a lot faster, just because they do get a lot of runoffs. But that's another reason why I like to put a saucer, like a plate, underneath the pots, so that they would catch water, and helps a bit with that evaporation, minimize the evaporation that way. And growing in pots, there's also like ceramic pots, plastic pots, what else? Grow pots is another big one, which I actually have been really getting into, because it's flexible enough that I can basically shove it even against a quarter, or make it fit in a tight space, because it's made of fabric, so it's really flexible that I can kind of shove it and make it fit in any kind of funky space. But the problem with growing in grow bags is that they do require more moisture, because it's very excuse me, how should I put this, water or moisture just evaporates a lot faster through fabric, because it's all breathable, which is great for air pruning the roots, so that your plants won't get root bound. But yeah, it does require more watering. You can always put in a water irrigation, so that it would be watered automatically. So yeah, if you're growing in a place that you're renting or not planning on staying for very long, or if it's a plant that you're unsure about how it would do in full sun, part shade, or whatever that is, and you want to test things out, I think growing in a pot would give you that advantage to move it around to see where would be a good permanent home for that particular plant. And yeah, there's different sizes, when it comes to growing in pots. Now if you want to grow some fruit trees or zucchinis or tomatoes, you know, things that would grow a lot taller or bigger, obviously you want to choose a bigger container, and these containers will allow them to, you know, the roots to expand, so you have much healthier and bigger plants that way, and provide you with a more larger, a more abundant harvest of fruits. Also retains more moisture when you have more soil and like just a bigger space for the plant to grow in. But I would say if you're not sure about where this plant would go, get some wheels and put it under your pots. That would make your life so much easier. So when it comes to growing in the ground, I would say you definitely can pick up, you know, the plants or the trees, extract it and move it somewhere else, but it's going to take a lot more work, and it's a much higher chance for these plants, especially trees, because these trees, the roots really expand far away, so there's a higher chance of transplant shock when you want to dig things up from the ground. But the great thing about growing in the ground is that it does allow a lot of room. It's basically almost like unlimited space for the roots to expand into, you know, the trees to really flourish that way. So it's really great for especially fruit trees, any kind of really large bushes, you know, perennials, something that you think would last, you know, that's going to last long. And say planting a tree in the ground, you can have a lot of nice shade to provide for your container gardening below the tree, or you can even plant some vegetables directly in the ground or raised beds, but with the tree, just like how I'm under the tree right now. And being so hot right now, the tree provides nice bright indirect sunlight for a lot of the plants to keep them happy. Also to help retain that moisture in the soil so you don't have to water as often, and to, you know, protect that the soil from getting hit from direct sunlight, which can harm some of the beneficial microbes in the soil. So that's kind of the thing about, you know, growing in the ground is, like I said, it is great for plants. Well, it's good for trees to expand, you know, but the thing about, I guess sometimes it does take a lot more work to plant in the ground, because I mean, unless you're really lucky and you get really good native soil, but for me it's a lot of clay, like heavy clay soil, so dense that I think it's really hard for the roots to expand. So if you just dug a hole without amending the soil, it's going to be very hard, the tree is going to have a very hard time to establish. It's going to take a lot longer for the tree to establish than whereas you dig a much bigger hole and you amend the soil and really fluff up to get this tree root started when you plant it in. So it takes a little more work when you're working with native soil. But yeah, once you get it in the ground, it's actually less worrisome. Say if there is, if you had an automatic watering system but it broke for whatever reason and you're on vacation, the tree would most likely thrive, because especially if the tree that's established, you know, the roots are going really far and really deep into the earth to extract moisture on its own. So in a way, that's why a lot of trees can be more like self-sustaining, because they can find moisture on their own without you watering. And yeah, that's what's great about growing directly in the ground, but you do have to amend a lot. And another option is raised beds. Raised beds, I think, is kind of an in-between. It's kind of similar to growing in containers, but more like a larger container, but it's so big that it almost feels like you're growing it in the earth. The thing about growing in raised beds, I mean, I really love that there's different sizes when it comes to raised beds. You can have different heights as well. That's higher raised beds would be a lot easier for you to work with. Maybe, you know, especially if you have back problems, you don't have to hunch over or bend down to work on your garden. You can just stand and so build a higher raised bed, you know, or lower to the ground, depending. It all depends on your needs and your space. And raised beds, there's, you know, there's a couple kinds I would like to highlight. As one of them is that you basically don't have a true bottom, so it would actually be connected to the earth. There's, you know, say like if you put a raised bed on top of concrete to start building, then there is no way for the roots to actually go, you know, past the concrete to get to the ground. So then you're not planting in the earth, you're actually growing in a large container in that sense. Whereas there's raised beds that you can, that basically you are containing, you're having a confined space to have nice soil to grow your vegetables and your plants in. But if they want to, the roots can go deep, you know, into the earth and be connected that way. Raised beds, I think it's great that it's usually built for as much space as that you have as possible, so that you can put more plants in there. You can do more interplanting, you know, plants that do well together. So raised beds in a way can allow you to grow more plants because of the size. So you can do, like, you know, rotating different crops in there throughout the year, and in a sense you're saving space if you have a raised bed. It's like, think about if you have multiple containers lined up, right? You're going to have you're wasting a little bit of space in between each container, whereas if you have just like one long raised bed, you can have a continuous, like a lot of plants lining up in there and grouping them however you want, and you can have really good soil in there. You don't have to deal with the fuss of native soil and mixing it all in. You just put a container on top of the land and you start pouring nice soil in there and composting and put your plants in. And then you can also add a water irrigation in there to help feed your plants so that you don't have to tend to it a couple times a day or every day. You know, if you're really busy, you can, you know, if you have to leave your house for more than a day or two, your plants will be taken care of with the watering system that you have. So raised beds are really great that way, because they're also, like I said, the size is bigger. They don't have, well, they can help retain moisture better than containers. So yeah, let me just kind of highlight very quickly. Basically, containers growing in pots, individual pots, will allow you to grow a smaller amount of plants, or fewer plants. You can't fit as many plants in a container. They have a tendency to leach off the nutrients faster than other kinds of planters. They also require more water often than, let's say, a raised bed or in the ground. And then in the ground is a more permanent solution that you would have to kind of amend the native soil to get the plant to establish faster. But, you know, after a while, once these, but mainly I think of trees if you want to plant them in the ground. So eventually these trees will take care of itself by finding its own water source. Versus growing in raised beds, they would allow you to grow a lot more plants in that same amount of space, just because you have a much wider or longer space to work with, and the moisture would retain a lot better in a raised bed versus in a container. Well, there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, find it helpful, especially for those of you who are new to gardening. I hope this would give you guys some guidance as to where you should be placing your plants. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe to this channel for more videos to come, and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, where I do some instant updates of my life that you don't get to see on this channel. And if you'd like to support me in my work, I really would appreciate that. I'll leave a link down below to my website at wendyland.com, along with some links to the other that I just mentioned just below this video. Thank you all so much. Stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you right back here in the next video. Bye guys.